We'll get started, and I want to welcome everyone to this Zoom session this evening, both those that are online with us now, as well as those that are going to be watching this recording later. This is produced by Manitoba Association of Christian Homeschools, and it's part of our Exploring Home Education series. We have had 7 sessions so far, and the question or the theme for this evening that we'd like to talk about is a perennial question. It's one of the questions that I've been asked many places around the world, and whether it's in the English language, or whether it's the Russian language, or whether it's in other languages around the world, we've been asked, so this home education thing sounds really interesting, but how do I, in some cases it's people who have started, in some cases it's people who have already been doing it for a while, but how do I motivate my kids? Some things are just super keen, and other times you run into difficulties. How do you deal with those? And then the question becomes, how do I deal with attitude? Attitude on the part of the kids, this is, not necessarily.
Oh.
But it's been a question that we've been asked often, and I've asked our 2 guest families this evening, Aaron and Corinne Bergeron, who are from Fanistil, Manitoba, and Corinne has been working as the program coordinator for the MACHS conference, which didn't happen this year. But a lot of the some of the speakers that were part of what Corinne organized have been featured. Like last week, we had mind is blank. Who was speaking last week?
We had on Bible.
Mike Knox.
Mike Knox was speaking. He did a great job on teaching the Bible, and then we'll also hear from Donna Ferguson. Dan isn't able to join us this evening. I don't think he's on the road or at meetings or doing other things. Donna comes to us from Calgary and is a longtime friend, and we're glad, Donna, that you could join us. And we'll ask you to introduce yourselves more when it gets to that point. So we'll start with Aaron and Corinne. How do we motivate our kids? What's been your experiences, and what kinds of things would you like to share? And how can we deal with attitude? How do you deal with attitude? What I'm going to do is I'm going to pin your video so that you can. And what we'll do is we'll ask other participants if you can mute your microphones. I'll do it here for everybody, and that way we'll be focused on what you're saying, Aaron and Corinne, and I'll mute mine as well. So over to you.
This is, to be honest with you, not exactly an easy question to answer, to be honest. So before we even get started, I'd just like to let everybody know I'm more than welcome for any questions to be asked at any time. And if you have a specific thought or something you want me to repeat, then by all means, please put it into the chat, and Corinne and I will do our best as a couple of homeschooling parents to do what we can to help you out and point in the right direction, Lord willing. If we don't know the answer, if we don't have an answer, we'll be honest and we'll think about it, and we'll do what we can to try to get an answer to you in the future. So
maybe Corinne and Aaron, if you could just tell us a little bit about where you're at in your homeschool journey, and a little bit about your journey. It's always good just to kind of introduce, and maybe if you could just speak up a little bit. You're coming through, but just a little bit faint.
Okay, no problem. Well, so for myself, number one, I wasn't really raised in a believing home. And so for me, anything to do with raising kids and anything to do with home education is completely almost a bit of a brand new venture, if you will, a brand new focus. But we're here living in Fanistil, Manitoba. We've been married for 20 years now. We have 7 kids. Our oldest is just a week away from getting his license. He's 16. The next one is going to be 15 in about a week. Then we have another boy who is 11, another one who's 9. Then our first daughter who is 8, next daughter who is 5, and another one who's almost 2. So we are pretty much running the full spectrum, if you will, of age groups and whatnot when it comes to homeschooling and kind of where we're at with all of that. So we're right in the thick of it across everything from kind of high school all the way down to just in the beginning stages of entering kind of homeschooling. And it's a busy home, but it's a blessed home, that's for sure. What do you think?
That's good.
Okay. So when it comes to homeschooling, when it comes to our experiences with how we're doing with things with our kids, there's a couple of things that came to the forefront of my mind when we first kind of started getting into it. I kind of wrote down a couple of notes. One of the things is that homeschooling is something that needs to be free. And in order to motivate your kids, there needs to be a framework, yes, but there needs to be freedom to move within that framework. Three thoughts that I kind of have on the tip of my mind as I've been kind of contemplating and mulling it over is that we need to have freedom from imposed expectations. We need to have freedom from past methodology, and we have to have freedom from the tyranny of urgency. And I'll kind of go through and explain those. Freedom from imposed expectations. I'll give you a bit of an anecdote. I have this joke when I introduce myself to some people. I've had it in the back of my mind to one day introduce myself and say, "Hi, my name's Aaron Bergeron, and I learned to walk when I was 12 months old." Or, "Oh, hi, you're so-and-so," right? And expect them to respond something ridiculous like, "I learned how to feed myself without making a mess when I was 18 months old." We have this thing where it comes to expectations that are imposed upon us that come from external sources, from comparing with each other or comparing with the school systems or comparing with other homeschool families. And while we can be able to learn, having those imposed expectations from what is happening and comparing ourselves with others can really be detrimental, can really be stagnating, can be difficult for us to really see and enjoy the experience of homeschooling our kids. We need to be able to free ourselves from those imposed expectations. One of the things, for example, would be in a practical sense, when it comes to motivating our kids, some kids have an aptitude for math, some have an aptitude for reading, some have an aptitude where they learn very well and very quickly with hands-on experience, but to sit at a table and fill out math questions, it's just really difficult for them. And so I would say I defer to my wife's wisdom on this when it comes to expecting a kid that at the age of 5 or the age of 6 has to start this class in math, or this has to be able to read this many words, or something like that. From there, I would also say freedom from past methodology. We have this idea of how we were taught growing up. And, whether most of us, I'm sure, were used to being raised in a public school classroom setting. And so there's the sitting at a desk with a teacher going and teaching us something from the front of the class using a whiteboard or a chalkboard or things like that, or randomly asking questions to individuals in the class. And that really is kind of how my experience was growing up. And obviously, right, coming from the upbringing and the age that I am and whatnot. And within homeschooling, there's a tremendous amount of freedom that we have where we don't need to follow those guidelines. We don't need to follow that strict way of doing things. All kids learn differently. I'll give you, for an example, with one of my children, I was trying to teach them the alphabet and go through the alphabet. And what I would do is I would make little pictures of the letter A, for example, and then I would say the letter A says, and then we'd make all the different sounds the letter A makes, and we would do all sorts of little cartoon sketches, and they would have to recognize the letter, and we'd go through one letter at a time. And I didn't even make it halfway through the alphabet, and they're like, "Dad, I don't really need this. I can read already." And they really picked it up just through going bit by bit. I tried that on my oldest daughter, and it didn't work at all. And so freedom from methodology is not just how we learned it, but also trying to put your kids into kind of a cookie cutter mold and how you go through each one, how you deal with each one with whatever topic that you're learning with them or studying with them. The other thing that I think is most important on this list is the freedom from the tyranny of the urgent. When it comes to the expectations, it comes to methodology, we have a framework. On this day, we learn this class. This way, we're going to learn, like, we're going to go through this subject. This day, we're going to go through these subjects. We have a freedom where, number one, if a child is really, really interested in something, there's nothing stopping us from pushing aside the other things that we had planned within our framework and chasing that through with them. As well as when you're trying to teach, even in moments when you're not teaching your kids something, we have to get into the mindset that everything that we do in our home can be a teaching moment, both when it comes to biblical principles and when it comes to the subjects that we're teaching our kids on a daily basis. So the tyranny of the urgency, or the tyranny of the urgent, I would classify that in two ways. And one, no, we have a strict schedule, we have to follow our schedule. Well, yeah, you need to have a framework. Every body has a skeleton, but no two bodies look the same once you put the meat on that skeleton. And so there's that aspect of it, but also you can't be too busy to stop and answer a child's questions, or too busy to take the extra time that it takes so your kids can learn what it is that you're hoping that they're going to learn, what that you're trying to teach them. So I would say within that, yes, there's discipline, there's self-discipline that you need to teach your kids. There's some of these things that are important, but it's that balance of freedom and yet discipline, or the freedom within a framework. And that's kind of how we try to go about teaching our kids, no matter what subject, no matter what child it is that we're dealing with. That's where I would start that personally. You want to weigh in on some of this?
When you follow through on some of their questions, it doesn't quench the thirst to learn. It encourages them to ask more questions and to be curious about this world that God's created for them to explore and learn about. Yeah. So that's your.
I think when you operate in that frame, within that framework, and you have that freedom within that framework, kids don't get overwhelmed. You don't have that kind of undue kind of pressure the same way. That's kind of how I'm looking at it, right? So how does that look practically? How do we go kind of applying that in a practical manner? There's so many different ways in which we have done things over the years with the different kids. Where do you want to go with that? Okay. So when it comes to, for example, you're dealing with math. We'll deal with just math, for example. As I said, there's an expectation that at such and such an age, children should start such and such a course. So for example, with mathematics, at this age, they should be doing this much math. And I would say, well, you have a freedom that you can hold off until they're ready. If you notice that they're really, really struggling with it, then you can hold off until a time when they're more ready to be able to start handling that kind of material. When it comes to things like the alphabet or learning how to read, in our house, we've been blessed. I love to read. I read out loud to the kids almost every day. There's a real benefit and a real blessing in homeschooling to that as well. But so we didn't have a real difficulty with, for example, our first 4 boys, with them learning to read and them learning with their alphabet and going through stuff. I would come home from work when one of my boys was still only 3. And the older one was learning how to read, and then he would go and he would play school with his younger brother and teach him how to read. And so I come home from work one day, and where are the boys? Normally they come running to the door, Dad's home, come give me a hug, and they didn't rush to the door. And so I walked down to the hallway and peeked into their bedroom, and this 3-year-old was basically reading Green Eggs and Ham out loud to his older brother, who had taught him to read because they were playing school. So when it comes to that, it wasn't a difficulty. But then when I got to my first daughter, like I said, reading and trying to teach her the alphabet and trying to go through with her, it was difficult. She just wasn't getting it. She wasn't understanding it. And so the expectations and the methodology and the urgency of it all, we're able to find that freedom to just put it away and say, you know what, she's not quite there yet. I know she's 1 or 2 years older than the other ones were when they were first starting to learn, but she's not quite there yet. When she's ready, when we can recognize it, we'll start working with her on some of this. And about 6 months later, she came up and she was, okay, I'm ready to go. And she wanted to learn. And within one summer, she had advanced through what took the other boys months to get in when it comes to proficiency with her ability to read and vocabulary. She picked it up over the course of one summer, and she was more than surpassing what we would have personally expected she would have been at by that age. So there's different ways in which we can have that freedom. And when you have that level of freedom in your home, when you're educating your kids, it frees you up as well to how you approach things, to when you approach things. It frees you up to be able to really work with your children. And I guess that's really at the heart of what it comes down to when it comes to home education, when it comes to specific subjects, is working with your kids, learning how to work with that momentum. And so I would say when they have an interest in something and they're asking a lot of questions, even if you don't know the answer, that's still a wonderful thing, because you can put aside some of the other things that you had on your schedule or had in your framework for the day. You can put all that side of stuff away, and you can chase down with them with that momentum to just go for the full distance that you can take them, and you can walk with them. And instead of actually leading them, you're partnering with them in their education. That's one of the ways in which I find it really helps to motivate your children, is that you're working with them. As they get older, I find that they need to really start learning how to take ownership over their education. And so these are the subjects that you're supposed to learn by law or by what the education, the requirements of the Ministry of Education have. These are what you have to learn. And so we need to find a way to basically make sure that that fits into your framework. But we are going to go above and beyond with some of the other electives that you got the freedom to be able to learn. And so there's that freedom. And not only the freedom of being able to choose not only subjects and subject matter and things like that, but also kind of the freedom of, okay, now set your schedule. The expectation in our home is, as it's age appropriate, as the older they get, the more we include them in getting some of that ownership, but the more we're priming them and prepping them to know and understand that you have to be able to follow through with what you say you're going to do. You have to be able to handle decision making. You have to be able to handle expectations. You have to be able to handle these things in life. And so we're going to give you the freedom within that. So working with your kids, finding the freedom, and then also working with your children, and instead of working against them, or instead of trying to lead them in a spot. Now, I know that's not always doable, because like I said, there are requirements that they have to be able to fulfill when they're learning. There's requirements that they need to live up to from the Ministry of Education and whatnot. So we need to meet those requirements, yes. When it comes to those things and how we handle those things, for example, we have one son who really just did not like math at all. And so within that freedom of methodology, we can be able to, okay, you know what? You don't learn as well doing it this way. Let's find a more fun way to do it, or let's find a more practical way to do it. There's simple things like, for example, this is one that I would point out to many people. I have home renovations that I have to do. I have to frame in a new wall, or I have to, re-insulate a wall or something, or there's, muffins being made in the kitchen or something like that. That's a wonderful opportunity, because they're really excited to get their hands on to be able to learn with you. But you can take that, and being the parent, you would assume that you're a little bit smarter and a little bit wiser than your children. And you can take that and make that a teachable moment. Okay, here's 1/4 cup, and there's this, or there's 3/8 of an inch plus, 5/8 of an inch. And now they don't even realize, in the fun of the hands-on activity, you are now teaching them fractions. So that would be another way in which I would point to, not only working with them, but showing them how what they're learning has a practical application in everyday use. I think that's really, really instrumental. That's really, really important. Instead of just teaching them what it looks like on paper, showing them how in the day-to-day, everyday life, this actually has impact. This is how you use it. This is why it's important to use this. I think that's really important when it comes to motivating your children as well. So just to recap for myself, just to kind of collect my thoughts, I like to repeat things anyway. You have the freedom, you have where you're working with them to motivate them. You're giving them hands-on practical application. We're working with you, as well as learning each child, and each child learns differently. One can sit down with a math book and work out all their problems and be able to have no problem with it. Some of them you need to actually have something that they can manipulate that you can put on the table. Here's 3 apples, here's 4 apples. If you had 3 apples and you had 4 apples, how many apples do you have? And they can actually hands-on do it, right? So learning how your children learn is really instrumental in being able to keep them motivated as well. And again, that goes right back to freedom from past methodology. How your children learn and understanding and spending time with your kids and learning that some kids learn better one way than another. That's really important in being able to educate your kids, so that way you're working with them, not working against them. I think that's important. Those are just some of my thoughts at the beginning of this anyway. Then of course you're going to deal with the situations though where your children are kind of really struggling with something, or they're really overwhelmed. It could be something like they don't understand a math problem. They keep on getting the answer incorrect. Having the patience to really slow down and work with them. Really finding that time to sit down and work with them and slow the pace down. You don't have to, okay, I know that this lesson says you're supposed to do this lesson in 1 day, but there's nothing stopping you if they're struggling with something to take it over 2 days or even 3 days if necessary, for the sake of really making sure they understand it. Because what's important at the end of the day is not that they went through the material within a certain time frame. What really matters most is, did they understand the material, period? That goes right back to fighting against the tyranny of the urgency, or the tyranny of the urgent. You're not constrained, you're not handcuffed and locked in to having to live up to certain requirements in such, this exact time frame. You can take it and you can draw things out as long as you need to make sure that they are getting and understanding the material that way. Again, like I said, I think that's really important too, that you're not handcuffed. I'm repeating this idea of freedom within home education, the freedom that you have. It's a tremendous amount of freedom to make sure they're learning in a way that they're best able to learn, and you're not handcuffed by anything other than the schedules that you set up or the framework that you set up, and then what the minimums or what the requirements are by the Ministry of Education. There's nothing stopping you from, for example, I've got home renovations I'm working on right now, where there's nothing stopping me from saying, okay, you boys, you can do a little bit of book work that needs to get done in the mornings, but for the afternoons, you're mine, and we're going to do hands-on all week, and you're going to help me get this work done, because you're going to learn these life skills. We're going to show you how to go right from the very beginning of a project to the end of a project, where, okay, you need to figure out how much material you need, so you can figure out how much the material is going to cost, so that way you can budget it properly. And then you're going to, and you go through step by step with those projects. Those are all important things that you're going to need to learn to know in life anyway, but you're taking them and you're showing them how the math that they're learning and that kind of stuff really applies to everyday life that way right away. If you've given them that, then you've already gone a long way with it. I think the last word I would have of motivating your children is, how do you foster an environment? The question I ask myself anyway, how do you foster an environment with your children that learning is something that's actually seen as being fun and enjoyable? And with each child, again, that's something that you can't answer in a cookie cutter, one size fits all way. But some of the essentials when it comes to fostering an environment where learning is fun, learning is seen as enjoyable, learning is your reactions to how you deal with your kids when they learn stuff. I would say it really comes down to, as a parent, you need to do 2 important things. One is, when they're expressing an interest, you really need to be able to work with your kids to follow through with what is interesting them, and you need to be there with them alongside them. But also, I know as a parent, sometimes I have this idea, I need to get this done, I need to get this done, I need to get this done. But when they're expressing interest in something that I'm learning or something that I'm doing, I need to be willing to include them in that. And that's right from a very, very young age. And if you start that with them when they're a really young age, I really believe, and I've seen, that you can carry that through as they get older. So when I'm sitting at my table and I'm doing a Bible study and I'm digging in for a lesson I'm going to teach or for something like that, I find it's really exciting when I'm like, wow, this is really neat. And then, oh, what's that, Dad? And they're asking the question, what's that? What's so interesting? What's so neat? And then I can pull them alongside with me. I can say, well, oh, look, I just learned this. I never saw this in the scriptures before. Or when I'm working on a project on something, I'm like, oh, that's how that works. Oh, that's how what works, Dad? And they've expressed that little question or that little interest. You can take them alongside and you can go through and you can work with them. I guess this all stems from something that should have been stated at the very beginning. When you're a homeschooling family, all of life is a learning opportunity, and all of life, every day, the education goes across the entire day, not just when they're doing their official framework schooling, when they're working through the day while I'm at work and Corinne's home with them or anything like that. But everything that you're doing, it's a chance for them to learn, a chance for them to grow. I think also kids need to be able to have this sense of freedom to not only make mistakes, but they need a parent who can come alongside them and be able to learn how to ask the correct questions so they can learn how to learn from their mistakes. It's not so black and white as with a math book. With a math book, they'll do a couple of questions and you'll do the correcting. This one's wrong, this one's wrong, this one's wrong, do it again. It can't be that way. It needs to be come alongside and say, okay, here's when you made a mistake. Now let's look through this together step by step for this math question you did, for example. Let's look through this step by step so you can learn how to spot where you made the mistake for yourself so you can learn how to correct your own mistake. And that is life applicable for not just schoolwork, but for anything that you're doing. I think that's really important. So yeah. And then it comes down to when you're dealing with more bad attitudes. I personally think Corinne would be better at speaking of that than I would because she's with them most of the days. But I think if you have a good relationship with your kids and you're fostering that a great relationship with your kids and you have that level of discipline in the home, motivation has been not an issue with me when I've been working with them as much. I don't want to give the impression that my kids are super perfect angels because I think we are all wise enough to know differently. But when it comes to dealing with bad attitude, again, no two kids are the same. One of them you made to be able to just sit down with them and say, okay, take a step back, take a breath. Why are you having such a problem with this? Is it a matter of, are they doing something they really don't want to do? Well, there's lots of things that I have to do on a daily basis, for example, with my job that I don't necessarily want to do, but I have to do anyway. And so with my teenagers, especially my oldest, I can have that conversation on an adult level and say, you're just going to have to buckle down and get it done. And that may seem like a bit of a cop-out, but at the same time, there's that realization that's there on an adult level, I can have that conversation. Whereas with one of my other sons, he's trying to do a question and he just can't get it and he's flustered and he's got attitude and he refuses to do it. You can take a step back, you can say, stop, breathe, and learning to ask the questions that get him to arrive at the answer for himself. Again, it comes down to a matter of ownership. It comes down to a matter of how you're motivated, and it comes down to a matter of all these things we're talking about. But getting them to solve the problem, getting them to know and understand the joy that they get at the end of a hard-fought battle. And then when you can remind them of those hard-fought battles in the future, they've got something to draw from as well. And so sometimes it just takes a matter of patience. patience is not something that comes to me very naturally. Corinne is very much so the patient one between the two of us. And she's been angelic when it comes to sitting down with the kids and being able to ask those questions, slowly working through, okay, I know you have a problem, but take a breath. It may mean, okay, you know, go downstairs and go do something for 15 minutes, catch your breath, and then come back to it. And I will work with you. Getting them to understand, yes, you're having the struggle, but we are working with you. You're not alone on this. We're working with you on this. Stop. I've even had to go so far as, hold on, do you not trust that your dad loves you and has your best interest at heart? And ask them some of those kind of adult questions even, and they get it. Okay, now stop. Just, even if it's something as simple as, what is this number right here? Well, Dad, that's easy. That's an 8. Okay, well, what is this symbol right here? Well, that's a plus symbol. Okay, well, what is this number? If you have to take it back so far that you even have to go that way, then take it that far back if you have to. So that way they're able to understand how the little baby steps, when they're struggling with something, they've got attitude because they're struggling with something, take those little baby steps with what they do know, and then build on that foundation of the little things they do know and work through to finding the solution to the problem, finding the solution to the struggle that they're having. And then when they're done, you need to be able to point out to them, see, you could do it all along. You needed to stop, you needed to breathe, but you figured that out on your own. I pointed you in the right direction, but you figured that out. I didn't figure it out for you. And so when it comes to dealing with attitude and things like that, that's one of the areas that I think I've faced off with the kids the most, is them struggling with something because they're just not getting it, and how to have the patience to really dial it down, to get them to walk through it and take those baby steps so they can find the answer on their own, and you're helping them discover the answer. That again is another area where I think is really, really important when it comes to dealing with attitude. So do you want to build on this?
Yeah, sure. I found that with the boys, they need to move usually and get away from the problem and get some energy out before they can actually buckle down and actually focus fully on what's challenging to them. So it's not uncommon to have a child running around the kitchen table as we're doing reading with the girls, or having the boys run downstairs and jump it out on the trampoline for a little bit while they just get their blood flow going again. We've even had some of the teenagers just standing to do their work at the kitchen counter. Just the fact that they're not sitting on their bottoms helps their brain to function better. I have no idea how that's connected, but it has worked. And when they step back into what's been their struggle, then they do have a better attitude about it. They feel refreshed and almost as though they've slept on it. They can see it with fresh eyes and with less frustration, and then they can actually sit with you and talk it out, or work through that problem with you.
Yeah, the physical environment, and that's kind of a play on words. Not just physically where they're at, okay, not just physically with where they're at, but their bodies physically. The physical environment, it really does help. Corinne just basically alluded to that, right? Their posture, whether they're sitting, whether they're standing, whether they need to get some energy out. Sometimes you can basically turn it around and make it into a game, especially with the younger ones. I used to do a lot more physical training than I do now. And when the boys were younger, Corinne had tried it as a kind of a funny story, but Corinne had tried it. Okay, if whoever gets the answer the slowest, for example, they have to drop and do one push-up, or something like that. And it actually, the boys enjoyed doing physical things with me. And so when we would do math drills, they would enjoy actually doing burpees, for example, as a reward for having gotten the math answer correctly. And so it may sound kind of funny, but you can make it into a game that way. And there's nothing, for example, to stop you from, when it comes to physical environment, and when it comes to everything that you do can become a learning opportunity. There's nothing to stopping you from taking a game that they're already playing and making that game educational while they're playing it. There's nothing wrong with that at all. So One last thing that's on my heart. I can't stress enough for our home how important it has been when it comes to developing vocabulary, when it comes to developing a love of reading, when it comes to doing all that stuff, is reading out loud to my children. I try, as I said, I try to read out loud with my children almost every day if possible. At least, I'd say at least about 5 days a week, I'll read out loud to my kids. And it's been something that has been so much of a staple in our home, so much of a regular activity in our home, that even now I've got a 15-year-old and a 16-year-old where I will catch them kind of coming in and sitting at the dining room table while I'm in the living room, and they'll be listening in to what I'm reading to the younger ones, even though they've heard that story probably about 5 times by now. Reading out loud with your kids. If you want your kids to really love to be in the books, and especially when it comes to, most importantly, being in the book, in the Bible, they need to be able to see you in there and experience that with you. And I'm just using that as kind of to segue to really get into, if you really have a clear idea about what's important, where God is leading you to educate your children, in what way, you really need to, as parents, you need to basically model that. You need to, as I said earlier, you need to not only include them in it when they show an interest in what you're doing, but you need to model that. They need to see you with your Bible open in a quiet corner when they, if you, for example, if you're awake before your children in the morning, and that's your time to read your scriptures, they need to see you doing that. And you're not doing it at all because you're trying to put on a show in front of your kids. You're doing it because it's in your sincerity of your heart and your love of the word that you're doing that. But they need to see you. They need to be able to catch you and walk in on you while you're doing it. When they see that, then of course that's going to become something that they see as normal, something as acceptable, something as proper. There's one last thing that, again, is on top of all this that's really on my heart, that I think is really important. I know the scriptures specifically say, do not drive your children to wrath. And there's different ways you can drive your children to wrath. You can do it by being a hypocrite. You can do it by overwhelming them. You can do it by coming across as nagging them. There's so many different ways you can drive your children to wrath. And we need to not do that. If you want your kids to enjoy and love education, then you need to basically be on your knees before the Lord when time mandates that you do that, to make sure that you're not driving your children to wrath. And I can only think of one real, I guess this is a really impactful story for me that really has propelled me in that direction. I'm not hand on heart confessing or saying in any way that I've mastered that, because I'm not. I need a savior just like everybody else, and I need his forgiveness and his wisdom and his leading and how I deal with my children. But the last story I guess I really want to leave with when it comes to how we're dealing with our kids and educating our kids, and most importantly, I see home education as a pathway to discipleship. When you're educating your children at home, really what you're trying to do is you're trying to show them and you're trying to disciple your children. And I remember hearing a story a long time ago. It was actually from an audio track from a homeschooling conference from years ago. This is before we'd even started homeschooling. And the story was told about these two men that were at this homeschooling conference. One was a father and one was a son. The father was the keynote speaker, but the son was also there at this conference who was doing some workshops. And they thought, this is fantastic, like all homeschooling conferences. This is fantastic. We have a success story. We want to pick and glean and learn from them, basically, how they did it, so that way we can kind of emulate and learn from what they've done right. And so they figured, well, they asked them, can we put you on stage and do a Q&A with you at the end of this conference? And so, of course, they agreed to it. And so they were answering their questions, and somebody stood up and they asked the son something along the lines of, how did you come to believe and see that the faith that your dad had was the faith that you should have? How is it that your father led you in such a way that now you were doing something similar, teaching conferences and whatnot, just like your dad is. How did your dad get you, and how did this whole thing work out? And the son basically sat back and he said, I can tell you exactly the day that that happened. And he began to tell the story about when he was 8 years old-ish. And he said, I remember my dad had a really, really bad temper. And I was really kind of afraid of my dad because my dad had such a bad temper. And I remember my mom had asked my dad and said, my dad had asked my mom about this whole situation with his anger and all the rest. And my mom told him, yes, that I was afraid of him. And so my dad came into the bedroom and he sat down and he looked me in the eye and he said, son, is this true? And the son on the stage said, yes, Dad, this is true. I'm really afraid of you. You have a really bad temper and you scare me when you get angry like that, Dad. And the dad broke and the dad wept and he apologized and he humbled himself before that son. And he said, son, I'm under the authority of God's word every bit as much as you are. And so if you'll pray for me, I'll work and pray that the Lord will work on my heart so this doesn't happen, so we don't have to have this conversation again. And so the father and the son were there. The father had never heard this. Father on the stage had never heard this before, never really knew this. And the son who was on the stage said, from that day forward, I saw that Jesus was real and that the word of God was so important that my dad was going to do what the word of God had to say and would follow that and submit to that. And he said, when that happened, that's when I knew that what my dad believed in was real. And that's when I knew I should believe in it too. And the obvious point of this story is that as parents, when you're dealing with motivating your children, and most importantly, when you're dealing with attitudes, you need to look in the mirror because more is caught than taught. And I'll say that again, more is caught than taught. If your children are exhibiting attitude, you need to look in the mirror and see, is this potentially an attitude that they have caught from me? And I need to humble myself and I need to apologize to my kids. And I need to have my kids pray for me and I need to pray for them. So that way, when it comes to dealing with these attitudes, they can see that God is important. He is in control. His word is what I submit to. And in that act of humility, they just might take what you have to say a little bit more seriously. And you may save yourself at least a few problems, especially if it's something that is an attitude that they're exhibiting, because let's face it, a lot of times they've learned it from mom and dad first somehow. And so being able to go and follow through that route of humility and being able to understand that, understand the root of it, you really, I believe, that under the scriptures and in the Lord, you can really go a lot more of a battle and a lot more further in fighting that battle when it comes to fighting attitudes and fighting the rest of it. And again, that comes down to ultimately the message of grace and how grace applies to home education and how grace applies to all of this too. So, you have anything you want to add?
I found that the kids knowing what is expected of them also helps to motivate them, knowing that they have 5 or 6 subjects to tackle today. After the third one, we get snack. Then they see there's an end in sight. It's not just there's a big pile of books and they kind of get overwhelmed, but just letting them know, letting them cross it off a list, that helps to motivate them as well, especially the younger ones. So
yeah.
If there's anything else.
I don't see any questions. So if anybody has anything they want to add to any of this or any questions they have.
Well, we really appreciate the being able to spend time together with you, Corinne and Aaron, in your living room. And I'm sure that there will be some questions as we go through the rest of this evening. And what I'm going to do now is ask Donna to go through her sharing time, and we'll give you guys a little bit of a break. And what I'd ask is that if anybody does have questions, just type them into the chat box, and that way Corinne and Aaron and Donna can prepare for them. But we'll turn it over to Donna, and I'll pin your video. And if you just see, you're already unmuted. So Donna, over to you.
Thank you, Gerald. So it's interesting. I wonder if Gerald chose us to be the speakers because we both have 7 children. Maybe that's it. Maybe not. I don't know. I do have 7. I'll tell you that my husband, he's not here with me. He does work out of town and he left late last night, and coordinating online wasn't something we could pull together. Just to introduce myself, Donna Ferguson, obviously. We have been married. I'm actually, Gerald, if you could let me share my screen, then I can show you pictures of our family. I did a quick one little page thing, but I'll tell you, we've been married 35 years. I don't know. That's a big number, right? It's a big number for me. We just had major birthdays in our family. I think 5 or 6 birthdays in October happened. So our oldest is married. She is just turned 34, and she has 3 children. They have 6 foster children in their home. So they actually have 9 kids in their home, which is a very busy house. And then our next is, I don't remember how old they are. They all turn ages all in this window of time. So our next is a couple years younger. She's married, lives in Saskatchewan.
You'll be able to share your screen now, Donna.
All right, thank you. Let's see.
There you go.
Now I'll just pull this up. There we go. I'll try to make that bigger. Why is it not working?
If you go to start slideshow, it should go to.
I know. Where did it go? Well,
under slideshow and then start.
That's not working either. I know. I'm sorry. You know why? Hang on for 2 seconds here because this thing is in the way there. There we go. There. I just had to move that. You know, sometimes in the PowerPoint there. Okay, this is our family. The big picture is everybody all together. On the right, it's Dan with me, and then of course is the one with just our 7. And so you can see that I told you about our oldest. She's on the far right, dark. She looks like her dad. Danielle is next. She's standing behind Melissa there. She's married, has 3 little girls that are in French immersion. And so yes, Danielle was homeschooled. And they're not. It's so funny. I'll tell you, I can jump in now, but she's always in the back pocket, especially since COVID, like, okay, Mom. So if, right, the homeschooling is always in her back pocket. Our next is Amy. So she's over on the left there. She is married for 5 or 6 years now, and she's in university. I'll give you a little brief description about what their homeschool life was like and kind of some of the struggles that each one of them had that was interesting. We have our one son. I know. One boy in the middle there, right smack in the middle. Sam is turning 18 soon. Then we have Olivia, is the bright red hair there. And then the little ones, Ruth and Sarah, are 12 and 10. Olivia's 14. So that's our family. So if you look over on the big one there, you can see sort of our 4 that are still at home, and then the rest of them with their children. So we have 6 grandchildren in the mix of all of that. So much that I could say. Erin, you shared many things that kind of struck a chord with me, you know, in my notes I have here in front of me that were similar. We've just gone way further down the road than you guys, that's all. And so we're 25 plus. I think it's 27 years we've been homeschooling now. But it started with our oldest, who completed grade 3, and it was not great. You know, it's funny. It's one of those things that when God's called you to something and you don't do it, you kind of pay the price a little bit, and that is a struggle. Everything was a struggle. We had lots of difficulties, and so at grade 3, our second was in kindergarten. We decided to bring the girls home, and our third never went to school. She's completed university many years now, but she never went to school as a youngster. Why? We had crisis, and so we decided to homeschool out of crisis, not because it was something that was, although I believe that God spoke to me to home educate, It wasn't something that we, you know, did all the homework on and read all the books. We didn't do that. We're just like, here we are. And I believe it's in a position that many of those of you who would be listening to this now or listen to a recording later, I wrote down 3 questions. And that is, what in the world am I going to do? Am I going to mess up my kids? And is it going to be enough? And those are the 3 questions that I was asking way back then, and that I've asked along the way. And to be honest with you, I continue to ask. And I think they're healthy questions. I think it's good for us to be aware of the long-term effect of what we do. It's not a small thing. It's a really big deal. Home educating our children, doing something outside the norm. It's a beautiful thing, but it's unique. It's different. And we need to be aware, I think, that we are keeping our children's best interest in the forefront. What is the best for them? Not what's the best for me, what's the best for them. And so trusting God's leading, that he will provide what we need when we need it. So great example of that. Here I am homeschooling these girls, not really having a clue what I'm doing, but just winging it. I stumbled onto Sunlight. And so Sunlight is the curriculum that we use for many years, I think 7, 8, maybe longer years. And that was great, because for me, it was really important for them to be well read. And that was a goal that we had. And so we're stumbling through, we're piecing things together. I'm making mistakes and buying curriculum that doesn't work and putting it back on the shelf and trying to look for something that does work for each one of them. And I went to our Alberta homeschool conference with the mindset of, I need to choose my curriculum for next year. What am I going to use for this? And I had a couple of them heading into the high school years, junior high, really not high school. And I thought, junior high, high school of science, there is no way I'm going to be able to teach that. There's no way. I think I skipped most of my high school science, honestly. Let's be totally honest with you all. So how am I going to do this? And so I've been praying all along, Lord, you asked us to homeschool. You've given us these children. It's up to us to bring them up in the fear and admonition of the Lord. It's just this great responsibility that I feel. And I felt a real burden to do the right thing the first time. If you can't tell already, I'm a firstborn perfectionist, and I don't like to have to try to do things twice. That doesn't always work, obviously. So here I am at this conference, and I'm looking for material for them. And Jay Weil was one of the speakers, and he's the guy who wrote The Apology of Science. So I went into this one little room. It actually wasn't that many people. Of course, back then there were fewer numbers of us homeschooling. So I sat sort of midway on the left side, and I thought, I'm just going to take it all in. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I haven't really done much science with these girls. We're very outdoorsy, so we're outside all the time, but I haven't really done anything. I don't know what I'm doing. I think I've kind of messed up something. And so somebody asked the question that I had, and that was, if we're going to do this for high school, what are the prerequisites? What are the things that we have to have done before we can do your program? And he said, nothing really. You need to be talking to your children about the world around them. Take them for walks, go to the park, observe nature. I thought, what? I could do that. Okay. So then I continued to listen in. And honestly, it was such a high stress point for me that when I realized that he had books that I didn't have to know it all ahead of time, and we could just open the books and read it together, that I was dumbfounded, actually. That was a real turning point for me when I knew that God called us to this and that he would provide what we needed. So the question, though, of this talk is talking about attitudes, my attitude, my children's attitude, and how to motivate my children. And so to look at that, so I need to be motivated myself. I need to have the right attitude. And Erin, you spoke on that very clearly, especially at the end with that story. Thanks for having us end on a tearjerker moment there. But it was powerful. It's truth. Our attitude towards God, our attitude towards life, our attitude towards our own children, that we even want to have them with us, really sets a tone for your home. We didn't do everything right. We did lots of things wrong, but we did some things really well. One of them was just to let our girls, at this point, of course, there were only 3 of them, know that they were cherished and that we love them and that we want the best for them. And so we always sought out learning ways to be able to communicate with them well. So we read books like The Birth Order and Love Languages, trying to understand each other, trying to understand our kids, what makes them tick. I will tell you, having 7, if you have more than 1, you will know this is truth. They are not the same. And so our firstborn being very eager to please, raising firstborns is always interesting. My husband's a baby. So very eager to please. Whatever I brought out, she would just jump right in and just be participating and active. Number 2, not so much. Not that she wasn't pleasant. She was beautiful and pleasant and, pleasure to be with. But she was the one who would push my buttons probably more than anybody else. If there was going to be a challenge, then that's where that challenge came from I'm talking about when they were young. And I didn't understand. There were some missing pieces to my learning about my kids that I learned later. And that was, I read the book, The Core, The Question, written by Lee Bortons, who's the founder of Classical Conversations, and read the essay. You guys can write this down if you like, but it was pivotal for me. But that was the Dorothy Sayers essay, The Lost Tools of Learning. And she talks about 3 different stages of children. The pole parrot, when they're little and you say something and they repeat it, and you sing songs and they can repeat the song back to you. And that's a pleasure. That's like the grammar stage, right? When we just fill them full of all kinds of information. They get a little bit older, and this is where the challenge came. They start to push back. They want to talk back a little bit, and she calls that the pert stage. So if any of you have a 12, 11, in my case, sometimes even 10, those little ones that are coming up there and they're starting to challenge, it's not because they're being disagreeable and not because they're being defiant. It's because they want to know more. And I'll tell you, I wish that I had understood that my second born was not being defiant, but she just had this different capacity to learn so much through question and trying to pull more information out of us. And so what did I do with the information I had? I get down kind of hard on her and push her a little bit harder. And we weren't mean. We didn't, overly discipline them. That's not what this is. It was about an attitude between the 2 of us. And so we would butt heads, and there would be conflict. And as they got older, there'd be the blow-ups, and reaching those teen years, that's fun. And I've since owned that response and talked with her, and we're good. We've cleared that away. But humbling yourself before your children, again, Erin, you hit it, right? We humble ourselves before our children every step of the way. We would apologize to them, but then there was just, when you get more information, you need to deal with it appropriately. So it's so funny. We call our kids the batches. We have the first batch, and then we have the second batch, because there's 11 years between our 3rd and our 4th. And so just about the time you are kind of free and you can start kind of doing your own thing again, guess what? We were so excited. This boy was prayed for. His sisters wanted a brother so bad that they had some of our prayer warrior friends praying for a brother. And we're like, listen, this is going to take a miracle, not just a well-laid plan, but a miracle to get this guy. And clearly God wanted more for our family. And so 11 years later, Sam showed up on the scene. We were changed people. We had grown. We had learned so much. We've had so much restoration and truth come in our lives that we went back to our older girls, brought in some restoration there, but we were able to raise these next 4. It's funny, this is how they say it. They say, we did all the fun things, but you guys got the good parents. That's what the older ones say to our younger ones. And I would say they're probably truthful. where am I going with all that? I went down this rabbit trail on y'all, sorry. Learning to embrace the challenges. And so I go all the way back to my second, and she's, you know, sometimes we say our firstborns are our training ground, and I'm going to say for us, it was both of them because they were so different. And so, so we have one that's very compliant and easygoing over here, but just wants to learn everything and know everything and understand everything. And then our next one who's wants to learn and grow, and she's brilliant, can do anything that she puts her mind to now, but she pushed me to learn more and to learn to express myself differently and to learn to be able to explain myself differently. And, you know, we're in this together. So Dan's not with me here, but we were in this together. It wasn't about me homeschooling the kids and me doing all of the work. Dad was Mr. Principal. And so when we had trouble, you know, I'd have trouble with the girls and I'd be calling Dad in at the end of the day. I'm like, okay, so here we are. So for example, here's my oldest. She convinced us, primarily because of her experience in public school, but she convinced us that I'm just not good at math. It's just not my thing. I can do this, but I can't really do this. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. That must be the way it is. And so I would be getting frustrated. And finally, Dan sat down with her. And he's like, okay, open the books. And they sat, I don't know, a couple of hours probably, and worked through question after question after question in her math. And he discovered very quickly something that I had missed. She had a bad attitude. Oh, the bad attitude led to, I can't do this. And so when we worked out that attitude issue and it came to light, we were able to deal with the attitude and probably some of the wounding that had occurred to her, or with her, whatever. We could deal with that. And then all of a sudden that issue was out of the way, and it was done. He just had such great insight in that moment that I was just so thankful. And we've been able to refer back to that again and again and again, where we're like, wait a minute, is this really a learning issue or is this an attitude? Which leads me to my next point, actually, is that there are times that the learning difficulties that our children have, whether they are dyslexic or dysgraphic or whatever, there's just so many different, now there's a whole bunch more letters than what we even had back in the old days. But it's real, it exists. I have a whole handful of dyslexic children that I didn't recognize what it was initially. We recognize it now, and we can give them more grace and more skills to be able to work through that learning difficulty. So they're frustrated because they can't get through the work the way they think they should be able to get through the work. And so then there's pushback on us, when it's just because, you know what, actually there's something in the way. You can't read that font properly, or the shininess, I'm not sure if that's a word, the shine on your paper is too bright and it makes your eyes your eyes are bothered. It can be so simple, such simple things that we can do to help them work through a perceived difficulty. It's difficult because we don't have the answers. That's the only thing that makes it a difficulty, is that we don't have the answer on how to work through it. So to go back, the challenges are there. They're there to grow us. They're there to grow them. And when we embrace those challenges that our children bring before us, bring to the table, we embrace them instead of kind of pushing them and putting them into a little box. I think we all grow. I know we do. We all grow from that. Expectations is also something we should talk about. What are my expectations on myself? What are my expectations on my children? I know that I have very high expectations on myself, probably to a fault at times, maybe most of the time. And of course that transfers onto my children. I do have very high expectations on my children. And I don't know that that's necessarily wrong, but it's how I present those expectations that can be damaging to their hearts, can be confusing to them. Why do I expect them to do this work? Why, here we are back at that PERT stage again, when they want to understand why they need to do every page in this lesson and not just, hey, I think I know it, I'm going to skip right to the next lesson. Actually, we're going to come back. There's reasons. There's some skills that you're learning here. So I have to check my expectations all the time. Still do regularly. I'm sorry if you think that after homeschooling for so many years and having kids all growing up, it changes. It hasn't changed at all. Those expectations are still there. People pleasing. I know it's a hard one, kind of a hard pill to swallow, but we need to probably go there. People pleasing. Are my expectations as they are on myself or on my children because I'm concerned about what other people think? And I think that's something that I would challenge you all to consider. Consider that. Consider, who are we trying to please? Are we trying to please the Lord? Of course we are. We know that that's something that we're trying to do, but what comes in the way is our people pleasing. I do know way back when we had just the 3 girls, we had an aunt whose daughter and some other family members were teachers. So here we are homeschooling back in the day when nobody was doing it. And the biggest concern, of course, was socialization, which is hilarious now, but it was a big deal. It really was a big deal. And it's something to consider. But so here we have this aunt who has these expectations on, and is asking questions that are invasive, right? Or kind of asking questions that weren't really appropriate for her to be asking. And so I found myself, when we would get together, wanting to prove what we were doing. And so I was kind of pushing them a little bit to prove that they were really good readers, or they were good writers, or that they could, do all of this work. And it was ridiculous because it meant nothing. It meant absolutely nothing. That was not who we were trying to please. And so that had to be repaired. And even now, when I have 3 that are grown up and gone, I have to be careful with my words, because I can easily turn around to saying, okay, this is what we did when we homeschooled, and now Melissa's doing this, and look at the look at the success that she has experienced. And this is Danielle, and this is the success that she has experienced. And here's Amy. Well, let me tell you about her, And I do have those stories about them, but why am I telling those stories? Am I telling those stories because I'm insecure and I want someone to understand why I'm doing what I'm doing? Or trying to prove, hey, this works. Just so you know, it works. That's not my job. That is not my job to prove to somebody else what works. That's up to them to work that through on their own. My story is encouraging. I think our story with our family is very positive. It can appear that we have it all together. We look like, I mean, look at the screen. Here we are, this amazing family, beautiful children. Look how happy we are. But let me tell you that's just a snapshot. And yes, we are happy. And yes, we do have a beautiful family. But what we went through to get to where we are now, I would not wish on anybody. And so know that the families that you are encouraging, and even the families that are listening, it's okay to be walking through whatever you're walking through. Just don't stop. Keep moving. Keep moving. If homeschooling is really hard and one of your kids is really difficult, keep moving. Keep learning. Keep asking the questions. Keep pushing through. Keep bringing your kids closer to you and not pushing them away when it's difficult. Bring them as close as you can. We really can't bring them much closer than homeschooling, but here we are. Just keep going. Just keep going. And especially, I would say right now, when we have many homeschoolers or many people looking at homeschooling that never thought they'd be here. That was me. I never thought I'd be there. But just with the growth that's gone on in the homeschool world this season in life, don't give up. Keep going. And no, this isn't the end of my talk, but I just feel that the Lord is saying to you, don't give up, keep going. So a little update here. Sam turns 18 in a few weeks. I cannot believe that my son is almost 18. He was just teeny tiny, so not that long ago. So we had to start all over again. And then what does it look like? Starting all over again with babies and junior high, high school age kids. That was tough. That was a tough road. I'm tired. I'm hormonal. I'm got babies all over the place and teeny tiny children all over, and trying to do my very best for my older children. And to be brutally honest with you, we didn't do a great job. I don't feel that I finished my third daughter well. Did I love her completely? Did we provide everything she needed? Yes. But you know what? I don't know what to tell you. We were distracted with tiny children. What's the answer for that? I don't know. I don't know what the answer for that is. I still firmly believe that God called us to homeschool her and all of our children all the way through to high school. That was absolutely something that was on our heart, to have them become lifelong learners. And I know it's so funny. I remember sitting in a meeting with the Alberta minister years ago, and they brought that term in, lifelong learning. And I sat in that meeting, I thought, isn't that what we've been doing as homeschoolers right from the beginning? So it seemed a little odd to me, but that was the catchphrase that got brought in back then. And so we've taught them to read. They've been taught to read well, to write well, to have intelligent conversations, to be contributing adults in society, when it was not my goal to have them know everything that they needed to know in life. There was just never a goal, because I knew that if they could learn to learn, then they could always learn. And that's proven itself over and over again. So here I am with my 3 questions. What in the world am I going to do? Am I going to mess up my kids? And is it going to be enough? And so what in the world am I going to do? You're going to pray, because God will provide what you need when you need it. He's done it so many times. I can give you another example in a minute here. Am I going to mess up my kids? Probably. But you know what? That's okay. That's okay. We're going to carry that heart of humility, and it's going to be okay. They're going to be fine. Is it going to be enough? Enough for what? Enough for what? We're preparing them, but what are we preparing them for? I had no idea that my 3 daughters were going to end up in what they're in right, and what they're doing with their lives right now. There was no way to see down the future. So there's no way I could have fully prepared them for everything that they needed for their adult life right now. So where am I going? Some verses. Remember that when we seek him, we find him. When we seek answers, we find answers. He'll give us the desires of our hearts. So Psalm 37:4 says, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. So does that mean he's going to give you everything you want? Sadly, no. What it does mean, he will change the desire of your heart to line up with him and what his desire for you is. I love that. Revelation is beautiful. Doesn't matter what I think I need. I push in, I delight in the Lord, I spend time with him, I seek him, and he will give me the desires that he wants for me. So he will change the desires of my heart. Matthew 6:21 says, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Where's our treasure? What is important? What is actually important in all of this? What is important is having my children love the Lord and serve the Lord and be seeking him. So what are we up to now? Here's our fun update. I will tell you, I should jump in here. When I was talking about how God will provide what we need when we need it, I will tell you that having 3 older ones, the big gap, and then 4 more, there was as they were starting to get a little bit older, I don't know, probably about 8 or 9 years ago, I was like, oh, Lord, I'm going to be doing this till I'm like seriously old. And so how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? How am I going to have the strength for this? And he provided a program for us that we jumped in. As soon as I heard, it's Classical Conversations. I went to an information meeting, and I sat there having no idea what this lady was talking about. How does this program work? I don't know. What I did hear was you can follow this program for all of your children. At that point, it was only the 3 because Sarah was too young. The 3 kids, one program, one curriculum. What? All of them together? Done. That's all I needed here. so that's what I needed. I needed something, and God provided it for me. Now we're in for the long haul now, and Gerald alluded to that a little bit at the beginning, but it's not because it's the best. It's because it's what God provided for our family in this season. So where are we now? An update on each one of them. Our oldest is Melissa. You can see down in the big family picture there, she's in yellow with her husband beside her with their three kids, their boy and their 2 girls. They are homeschooling. They are actually in the same Classical Conversations community that we are with our children. And so we get to do homeschool life with my grandchildren. It's amazing. Like I said, could I have made a plan for where we are now? No one can plan for this. It's amazing. They foster, they have 6 extra little kiddos in their home right now, and it's full-time ministry. It's what God's called them to, and they're doing great. It's hard. I'm going to tell you this. If any of you foster, those who foster, you need to be praying for them. This is a hard road. Transition that happens. And when you put your whole heart into those children, it's a hard road. And so I'm really, really blessed by what they do with those bonus grandchildren that we have. Danielle is married to Jordan there. He's a pastor, an associate pastor in Estevan, big town. My big city girl moved to a small town, Saskatchewan. She's the one who gave me the most grief as a young child. And we laugh sometimes. She goes, "Mom, can you believe it? I married a pastor." And so she's, "I'm a pastor's wife." And so, right, God is taking a hold of their hearts. She works full time, and their girls are beautiful, and they're doing great, and they're thriving. And when I need to learn something, or I need to research anything, she's my first go-to. Because, "Danielle, I need help. Help me figure out how to do this." And so she's my researcher. Okay, daughter number 3 is Amy. She's married to Mark. They have a dog. She had a tough go. That little girl did not read until she was past the age of 9. Right? I think Aaron and Karina, I heard you talk about how your one daughter just didn't want to, and then all of a sudden, poof. Well, I'll tell you, this girl of mine who didn't want to, because really all she wanted to do was dance around in her little dress and play. When she caught on, she caught on. She has completed and just graduated her 4-year degree in an English major, which is really funny and really amazing. She's doing her master's, and she's a TA, so she was on the honors list. So am I going to brag on her? Of course I'm going to brag on her. Is it because we homeschooled her? Maybe. She would have done it anyway. I don't know. I do know that the character that has developed in her through her homeschool life made her who she is today, and she's beautiful and she's brilliant. She's way smarter than me, which I'm okay with. Next, we have Sam, graduated-ish. We're going to continue doing a little bit more at home with him, doing some online university. Everything's online now anyway. What's that going to look like for him? I don't know, but he's such a good kid. He's such a beautiful, kind-hearted young man. Then we have Olivia, who's 14. She's almost 15. And so, of course, these girls are such a blessing. And, I talked about what it was like when I felt the pushback, and as I entered into these teenage years, and I pushed instead with this beautiful second batch. And when the pushback comes, we embrace. So why do you want to know that? And, you guys, previous to Aaron, you talked about it as well. Ask questions. You were referring to the math. And I was thinking, wow, you guys are like teaching your kids classically. It's beautiful. Ask questions. Ask them why they're feeling this way. Keep pushing in. Ruth is our little artist. She's 12. She's not thrilled about growing up quite yet. She'd still like to be a little girl, but time marches on. So she writes and she paints and she draws, and she's very, very creative. And then we have our little Sarah, dances all the time. God knows we needed a Sarah. You know, she's so sweet, and she just turned 10. She forgets she's 10. She refers to herself as 9 all the time. Same thing. She just is a treasure and a delight. Not easy always to be raising up these kids. It feels like a weight because of the responsibility that we have as parents, raising up our children, and that is it going to be enough? It probably won't be enough, but I'll tell you what is enough. God is enough. And when we press in and we delight ourselves in the Lord, that He'll give us the desires of your heart. And that's my prayer for each of you as you press in, that He'll give you the desires of your heart, that the questions that you have, there are answers. We just don't always know what they are. There are answers, but God knows. And so that's all I have to share. I could probably go on for a little bit longer, but honestly, the truth is the truth. And that is that God knows what you need when you need it.
Donna, thank you. Really appreciate your sharing. Um, um, and thanks for allowing us into your living room and sharing with us your family and your journey. What we'd like to do now is just take some time to deal with any questions or comments that people have. And so we've had, I think, some good discussion going on in the chat room. And thanks to all, Corinne and Cheryl and others who responded to, not sure whether I want to call them Huawei P20 Pro, but that's what their phone is called, I guess. And the questions that were there about a child that was having some challenges in learning to write. But certainly sounded like a great situation in terms of the child actually reading German and English. So any questions that people have for Corinne or Aaron or Donna that you'd like to ask, or just general questions, and then we can just go at it. So any questions that anybody has, if you have them, you can just unmute your microphone or chat it into the chat box. Anybody? Some great information, great sharing, great stories, great inspiration that we've heard. And I'm not seeing any questions, and that's okay. Aaron and Corinne, what I'm gonna do is ask each of our presenters whether they have any additional thoughts or comments that they'd like to share after sitting back for a little while. And if you have questions, Cheryl asks Aaron and Corinne, can you explain how you let your older boys choose their schedule?
Well, Corinne, how about you go first with that one?
You want to activate your camera?
What I've done is I've made a chart kind of and saying I want them to do there we go.
Good.
I want them to do 10 lessons in math in the 2 weeks. So I've given them a 2-week schedule, but I've not told them when to do what. They kind of have to manage their time and decide, and then check if their box is off. So they also do a lot of choosing in terms of what their electives are, or how they want to go about doing science. But schedule-wise, all we really tell them is we start at 8:30. We're starting with reading all together. And after that, you guys need to be diligent and check off the boxes you need to check off for your day.
So it would look like there's a certain amount of this much work, this many lessons need to be done in this time period. And so figure out how to spread that out to do the chunks and the bites and the steps bit by bit day to make sure that you get that kind of accomplished by the end of that period. Of course, that needs to leave some freedom in there. Like I said earlier, you need to leave some freedom in there where if they're having a struggle with it, then you need to give them that space to say, okay, we're going to revise the amount that we kind of had set up for you to get done, because we realize we need to be able to dial that back a little bit to guarantee you're taking the time you need to understand the material that you're learning. And so there's always that freedom to improvise when it's needed.
We've also had to tell our 16-year-old that no, he cannot do 10 math lessons in one day and then not do it for 2 weeks, because that's exactly what he would do. And he would forget a lot of it before he needed to write the tests for that.
Yeah. There are sometimes too, when we have opportunities open up where, so I work odd shifts quite often. And if I know I'm going to have a Friday off and they've been wanting to go do archery, for example, then I would say, okay, well, you have the freedom to work ahead of schedule and kind of get caught up and spend a little bit more time doing school every day. So that way you free up some time in the afternoon. And so that's a great motivator for older kids, because now they're actually able to kind of almost have a work reward system that way. They want to be able to do this, but they have the schoolwork that needs to be done in that time period. So they can be able to kind of work a little bit ahead. But again, as Corinne said, with our oldest, that's not meaning that you can do all 5 lessons in one afternoon, so that way you don't do any for the rest of the week. There has to be some balance in there to show them how to spread it out. So, yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Aaron and Corinne. Any other thoughts or any other things that you wanted to add that come to mind, or that you didn't make it on your list earlier?
I really like that Donna and we here are in agreement when it comes to the idea of dealing with attitudes. We really need to focus on, and I can't hit this enough, we really need to focus on and understand how much of those attitudes also include us dealing with our attitude. We know each other, we live with each other, we see each other day to day. And that comfortability of the relationship really leaves it open for those tempers and those attitudes to flare on both sides. And so it really does come down to all of us need to start our day right with spending the time submitting before the Lord, submitting to the Lord and to his word, and making sure that we are all understanding where the common ground is that way. Sometimes the attitudes that we're getting from the kids is because, like I said, we've pushed it out of them because we don't have the right attitude. And so I really think when it comes to dealing with attitudes, we can't emphasize that part of it enough, that it's a two-way street. And so that's where the humility and the rest of it really needs to come into play.
Thanks, Aaron and Corinne. Let's go over to Donna. Donna, do you any thoughts or comments that you wanted to make just after a bit of time of reflection and sitting back? I'm just.
I'm not sure that I do. I think it's really interesting, Aaron, you just said the same thing, that we obviously don't even know, well, maybe it's not obvious, we don't know each other, but I believe that our presentations complemented each other so well. I was just really thankful. I'd like to make myself available for anybody who wants to ask questions specific to me. You can find me through Gerald, unless there's another form of reaching me. I'm not sure what you want to do. I'd be glad to connect with anybody. I think you're muted, Gerald.
You can always unmute yourself, and then you could say something so people could hear. But if you wanted to, you could chat your contact details into the chat box. And everybody has them. But Cheryl Ronald makes the comment that when you feel loved, you're free to learn, and I think that's very true. Sean says, thanks to the Bergerons and to Donna. Your talks were greatly appreciated. Donna's chatted her classical conversations, or her address there. We've got a few minutes, and what I didn't do was I didn't introduce Donna in her capacity She mentioned Classical Conversations as a program that she's used, and I just wanted to very briefly give Donna an opportunity to answer a question that I've had, and Donna is I'm not sure what the exact title is, but the national director or the country person for Canada for Classical Conversations. And I just wanted Donna just to briefly, and no, we don't have much time, but just to briefly let us know how Classical Conversation works. How does it function? You mentioned it, that's something that your family's been using. And just before we do that, Cheryl Ronald put in a suggestion. I'm not sure she wants to say more about it, but Fun Fridays, we would plan something special every Friday that would motivate getting schoolwork done. Um, so, Cheryl, I'm not sure if you want to come online for a minute and just tell us what that would look like for your family. What's an example of what your family would do on a Fun Friday before we turn it over to Donna? Do you want to unmute yourself, Cheryl? And I'll do it. There you are. So if you'd like to. If you'd like to chat, that'd be great, but if not.
We would try to just plan different things. Sometimes our homeschool group would plan like a field, a field trip on a Friday. So we would have something to look forward to. We would often, our local rink had public skating at 2 p.m. on Fridays. So that was also a motivator that we would do in the wintertime. There would be sometimes it was just little things. I mean, it wasn't necessarily spending a lot of money. Sometimes it getting together with friends. Sometimes it would be, going tobogganing or skating, or in the summer biking, or going to the park for a picnic, or meeting a friend to play tennis, or just a little something to look forward to, or if there was something special at home, whether it's time with Dad, if he was free. Aaron referenced that as well, to do a fun project together. A variety of things like that we did. But that was something that seemed to help motivate getting to the end of the week. Sometimes when by Tuesday, the week felt like it was going to be very long. So that's about all I guess I had in my thoughts for that.
Thanks, Cheryl. Appreciate that. And Donna, just enough. Can you give us a Reader's Digest, just a quick run through on? So, how does Classical Conversations work? We're not going to take a lot of time on this, but if you could just give us a quick picture on how does it work, so that if people are wondering about it, it gives them perspective. You talked about apologia as well as sunlight, but let's hear about Classical Conversations.
I gave the plug for the other companies. What was I thinking? I'm just kidding. We use all of that still. Okay, my quick little screenshot. And the only reason I'm sharing my screen here is just so that you can all just take a look at the clips there. Oh, hang on, I don't know what I'm doing. Sorry. I thought I had shared a different screen. That's so odd that it's gone. Okay, so I had another bit there. Now I don't have anything in front of me. Basically, Classical Conversations is a program. We homeschool fully and completely. We're not a school board. We are just an independent company that provides a program, and it's 3 C's: classical, Christian, and community. Now with COVID, our community has been looking a little bit different than normal, different parts of the country. And I had some numbers here. We have 34 locations in the country, 66 directors, and a director oversees a community. So basically imagine that you show up with your kiddos. If they're age 4 to 12, they do foundations in the morning. So think about that pole parrot, beginning of the PERT stage, but really lots of memorization of grammar, of and you can go on the website and take a look at all this information too. Then in the afternoon, those children that are age 9 to 12 do something we call Essentials. That is a full, complete English program. And I have tried all across the board the gamut of English programs. So we've got the grammar, the actual basic English grammar of it. We've got some fun math games just to build up their math skills. And then the writing program, we actually use IEW as our source text for the writing portion. And so that takes one day a week that we meet together. Then for those children that are age 12 and all the way up, they have something called Challenge, and there's 6 strands on that challenge where they're oh boy, there goes the brain. You said Reader's Digest. 6 strands. There again, go on the website. Go check out the catalog. I can send some information if anybody wants more information there, which is why my contact information is there. And so it's a one day a week. And when we get together, what happens is our children are connecting with other children that are doing the same program. So there's some like-mindedness that happens. They're not just, random. Our moms and dads are connecting. And so we're building relationships with one another too. Over the years, I've done all kinds of support groups and get-togethers and homeschool groups, and they're all good. They all serve a very important purpose. Something unique here is that we become our own interesting support group where really we're together weekly and we're doing the same program, and so we're sort of tracking that same direction together. But it's really about that meeting weekly together so that when something happens, we have at our disposal a group of people that are just ready to jump on. We've had some serious crisis happen in our communities. In our own community last year, we had a death of a child. And so what happens is those moms that we're already in relationship with are gathering together and building that community together. We do a parent practicum every year. Our parent practicum was a little bit different this year, of course. We're hoping to be able to be together in person. What's most important through all of this is that we are doing we're working on 2 educations at once. We're educating our children, but reclaiming our own education. And so while the parents are working alongside and attending with the children, it's not a drop off, it's not school, it's homeschooling. We are legitimately, clearly homeschooling our own children, but following the same program and modifying where need be to our own student. I don't know, Gerald, maybe there's more questions for that. I'm not really sure what else to say without becoming a big spiel, which I don't want to do.
Well, one of the just very quick questions that I would have, because I think I saw something about this. Traditionally, I know that classical conversations is groups or communities. There is a change or a provision now with all of the craziness in the world that families can do this kind of individually.
Yeah, we still need to follow some of the same sort of steps that we would do to begin a community. And so we have support representatives in place across the country. There's 7 of them, and they are the ones that are the point of contact for those families. So if there are families who are wanting to access the information and take part in the program virtually, we have that happening in different places, and also just at home. We have one mom in particular, it makes me think of this, who is unable to meet. They're in Ontario, and so Ontario is a little bit different than Alberta. They're unable to meet for health reasons, and so she became a director, which means she has access to all of the training, all of the resources, and then can provide that program for her young ones at home. And so it's not ideal because she's not in community, but they have access to it. And then outside of that, they're already part of a larger community. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yep, it does, Donna. Thank you. Really appreciate that, and just the very quick how does it work, and thanks for providing your contact information, because I know that both online and here there may be some questions that people have, so thanks for answering those for us. Really appreciate everyone being here with us. just while we were talking, Aaron or Corinne put up some cool stuff that they do in their home, which is destroying stuff, taking apart appliances and electronics. My question was, how do the girls like that? And they said they're new to it, but all the kids enjoy it. I think that's a fantastic idea. It's creativity in action, and being able to do lots of things. So great to see that. And if there's no other questions, I'm just gonna close us in prayer after thanking us. Can I get you to stop sharing your screen, or how do I do that here?
Just pin yourself.
There I go. I should be able to here. Place pin. Let's pray together and ask for God's blessing on the homes and the families, and as we implement and put into practice the things that we've heard about here this evening. Lord God, I thank you. I thank you that you know the answers. Lord, we thank you for the encouragement and the challenge that we've heard here this evening from Aaron and Corinne and from Donna. Lord, we just thank you for them. And I just pray that you would speak to the hearts of each one of the homes that's represented, whether it be later viewing or whether it be those that have been online, that you would be able to provide what's needed, because you can do beyond what we can ask and beyond what we can even imagine. And Lord, we look forward to your hand being at work in our lives first, and then in the lives of our children as they go on and learn and take on the challenges of life. Lord, we just thank you for this time that we've been able to spend, and for the message that we've been able to hear from you. Pray these things now in Jesus' name, amen. Thank you all for being here with us. Aaron and Corinne, thank you. And Donna, thank you for taking time out of your schedules to prepare and to present for us here this evening. On behalf of everyone, I just want to thank you for this and appreciate the time that we'll be able to spend together. Feel free to be able to tell others. Coming up next week, on October the 20th, we'll be having a session about fathers and the father's role in homeschooling. And Aaron, I hope, that's what my plan is Aaron and I will be doing this together, and we'll look forward to visiting with you. And then on the 27th, the last session that we've got scheduled right now is a session on special needs in homeschooling, and look forward to hearing from a number of families again that evening. So 2 more coming up, and then we'll have another one later in the year on progress report completion. So looking forward to spending more time. And again, these sessions will be placed onto our MACHS website for later viewing, and MACHS website.
No, MACHS.ca.
Thanks, Bev. And we would encourage you to pass on the links to other people. And thanks for joining us, and have a great evening and a great week. We'll hopefully see you again next week. Bye for now.